So we know that the president now is headed to the border. He will take his campaign for a wall to the U.S.-Mexico border today when he heads to McAllen, Texas. And the president is still holding out for $5.7 billion in border wall funding, despite the government shutdown lasting nearly 3 weeks. He says it's a matter of national security, even though the number of people trying to cross the border illegally is near a 20-year low.
But the truth is that a great percentage of the people entering our country, asking to come into the country, are not criminals. They are families, children, mothers who really are asking for protection. They're not coming here to hurt us, but rather for us to help them.
Major Garrett is in Hidalgo, Texas, near McAllen, to cover the president's trip. Thanks for joining us. Dark and early over there, Major. Major, yes. What is on the president's schedule today? What's he hoping to accomplish by heading to the border? You know, there have been those reports out there that he really didn't want to go anyways. And this is a president who, if he doesn't want to do anything, he's not really good at faking it, from what we've observed anyways.
Good point.
Well, there's a lot to unpack there. So the schedule, let's just get to that. About 3 hours here in the General McAllen area. It's not a huge presidential trip. There'll be a round table at a Border Patrol station that he's going to go look at the Rio Grande, where there are some crossings. Could all this information by the President of the United States be obtained in the Oval Office? Absolutely. But he wants pictures, he wants the trip, he wants to emphasize that this is a priority for the administration, and in the midst of this ongoing partial government shutdown, he is going to stay on message, stay with his insistence that Congress budge on this question of border wall funding, at least a down payment, as the Vice President Mike Pence described it to me earlier this week in our interview, $5.7 billion. And if he doesn't get it, as the President said yesterday, and people are, in his words, unreasonable on Capitol Hill, he will invoke a national emergency. We can get to that and the implications of it momentarily. About whether or not the President wants to be here. Okay. I was privileged enough, as were many other reporters, to attend an off-the-record lunch with the president earlier this week at the White House, off the record. Another news organization, not CBS, reported about that. The president's tweeted about it, so the contents are more or less out there. Let me add some context to those comments. Did he say this trip would be a waste of time? Yes, he did. But then he also said, what I mean by that is, this one trip is probably not going to change anyone's mind. That's a candid assessment of where things are. And yesterday's problems in the negotiating session and afterwards illustrates what the president was referring to. Both sides deeply entrenched, unable to agree about even the simplest facts or points of emphasis on who did what and what it meant and how it was received. So here we are.
Major, can I ask you a question about the reporting that you've done in speaking to White House sources? Just to add some further context to this, does it appear to you, in talking to folks in the White House and in and around the White House, the president has always positioned himself as a master negotiator, but this isn't like building a building project in New York City or in the tri-state area. This is about the wheels of government. And I wonder if, in his mind, perhaps some people feel that that's sort of how he thinks about this. Well, I'm just going to go to Nancy and Chuck, and I'm going to, negotiate with them, and then they're going to give me what I want. I'm going to give them a little bit of what they want. But that's not really what's happening here. And I wonder if it all stems back to that meeting in the Oval Office when Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi were there, and the president essentially backed himself into a corner by saying he would do it, and he would be the one to own it.
Right. This legislative process is much different than the one the president encountered when it was Republicans in charge of the House and Senate. At least then, he could have a process by which one chamber, the House of Representatives, would pass what he wanted. In the Senate, he could work it out and maybe negotiate. Senate Democrats were always opposed to this idea. That's why this border wall funding hasn't happened before. But now the legislative power structure is very different. And it is implacably aligned against the president on this question with that House Democratic majority. So the emerging theory in the White House is, look, we're going to keep going on this for a while. The president will continue to attempt to negotiate, but at some point, as his own words indicated yesterday, if he determines that the House Democrats, Senate Democrats, collectively or individually, are unreasonable and that their opposition to this idea of border wall funding is simply a partisan effort to defeat the president and not deal with the underlying policy issues, then he will use this national emergency and say to the country, I tried to be reasonable. This is a national security priority. I'm the president. I can make this determination. The funds are available, and I'm going to build it. The White House theory, which hasn't taken hold completely yet but is emerging, is that that would accomplish two things. Certainly satisfy the Trump base that wants a border wall construction accelerated. It would also allow the government to reopen because the president would say, I got my money, I'll sign the bills, let's move on. That's the emerging White House theory. Not there yet, but I think we're getting closer to it by the day.
You know, to me, I could be wrong. Major, you're a writer. Emergency signifies to me something imminent. I've never heard of an emergency like in your back pocket to pull out when needed, but perhaps I'm just my understanding of it is not. I mean,
and that would be, and Vlad, you've put your finger right on something that will be very important. Not only will there be political blowback if the president does this from Republicans and Democrats, but there will be immediate legal challenges. What is a national emergency, and are you essentially subverting the normal process about the way Congress, constitutionally empowered to decide what money is spent and what money isn't? Are you throwing all of that out the window because of this, and I imagine this word would crop up, obsession with border wall construction? And if you are you prioritizing that over all of these basic norms that have been followed and have worked well for the country for well more than 200 years? Why are you trashing all that, Mr. President, over this dispute, over one thing that even some experts who are sympathetic to your general emphasis on this issue will tell you will not address, that is to say a wall or a steel barrier, the humanitarian crisis or drug trafficking or some of these other issues? You may think it will, but it probably won't.
All right. Major at the border for us. Thank you, Major.
Thanks.